All right, guys, let's talk about some romantasy. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Hello if you're new here. My name is Trinity, and today we are going to be talking about the year-long journey I have taken in romantasy. There is a reason that I went on this journey. I love romance. As a fan fiction writer myself, I do love a spicy romance, but there were two books at the end of last year I absolutely fell in love with. Couldn't get enough of them. I needed more. Those two books would be The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy and A Strange and Stubborn Endurance by Foz Meadows. Megan Bannon for this one. So I fell in love with these books so much. I fell in love with these characters. I loved that there is a heavy romantic plot in these fantasy novels. So The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy is about a girl who runs a undertaking facility. She's an undertaker, takes care of the bodies, but her job is to undergo this surgery or perform this surgery that stops the dead from becoming undead. And she has a very strenuous job. She has a lot of stress on her due to familial obligations and all that kind of stuff. And then we have Hart, who is kind of like a mercenary bounty hunter type thing, who goes hunting down these undead creatures, bringing them to Mercy so that she can take care of them. And they hate each other. They hate each other. It is due to some assumptions that each other have made about the other person. So there is a little bit of a miscommunication trope here, but it's not really miscommunication. It's, I don't like you because of this. Well, it just happens to be untrue. They just don't know that yet. And then Hart, he's had this horrific job for so long. So many things have gone wrong in his life, and he pours out his heart and soul in a letter. And this letter, he kind of just sends it off into the void, like gives it to his person who delivers his mail and says, just send it into the void. He doesn't know if he'll get a response back. He doesn't know where the letter is going to go or anything like that. And it is delivered to Mercy. So the whole story here is there's this whole world of zombies and undertakers, and there's a whole lot of politicking because there is a big company trying to take over what the lesser undertakers have been doing this whole time. And a whole big plot twist with all of that comes into play. And then how the zombies themselves came to be. There's a whole fantasy story in this book, but the romance is awesome as well. So when I first heard this pitched, it was The House in the Cerulean Sea meets You've Got Mail or something like that. And I was like, oh, heck no. I have no desire to read anything like that. That sounds way too cute. No, this has some darker elements. This has some funnier moments in it. It also has two snarky-ish characters at the head. And so I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. A Strange and Stubborn Endurance also has this great fantasy plot where we have an heir to the throne who comes up against a whole lot of battles. And because they are not yet decidedly the heir to the throne, there's a whole lot of hoops that they keep having to jump through and a whole lot of political things they're having to maneuver around. But our main character is supposed to be married off to this person, and they do this so that he can survive the situation he's found himself in at home. And the thing about his situation is he's gay and he's caught. But what has happened at the very beginning of this is an essay. And yes, that is really tough to read, but the healing from the trauma that happens in this book is beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And I will say there is a little bit of a miscommunication trope in here, and it's not so much a miscommunication as it is, obviously this person is traumatized and I don't want to push. So that's what it becomes. And then a really dark story unfolds. So if you're not ready for dark, this is probably not the book for you. But it also made me realize that, like, again, there's a epic romance in this epic fantasy story, and I'm so excited. I just found out there's going to be a sequel to this book. So happy, so happy. And I haven't heard anything about Undertaking of Heart and Mercy. I don't know if that's going to have another publication or not, but I'm just very excited to have another Foz Meadows set in this world. But this started a journey for me. This started me like needing to find more of these types of books. So what we're going to talk about today are the books I've read, my thoughts on them. We're not going to go too into detail about all of them because I don't want to be here for forever, but I do want to talk about the ones that I found, yes, they fit. They fit this romantasy mold that I have been looking for, or no, they don't. Okay, so I was looking for things similar to this, and I kept hearing everyone talk about A Touch of Darkness. And this is a Hades and Persephone retelling, and so I was like, yes, gods, I'm on board with that. Heck yeah. We can go Hades and Persephone. I definitely like a darker romance. Definitely love enemies to lovers. Probably my preferred trope as far as romance goes. And then I started reading this one and I was like, okay, this is a little tongue-in-cheek. Like, we have a little bit more of a cheekier story and not really big on the fantasy elements because it's kind of set in a modern world. It's like New Greece or something like that. I don't exactly remember what all of the specifics were from this one because this is one of the first ones I tried, but I liked it. I don't think it fits the good fantasy plot and good romance. I do think there's a pretty decent romance here, but the main character is kind of dumb. She's kind of dumb, makes some dumb decisions, and for her being Persephone, I found a lot of it unbelievable. I enjoyed it though. Like, I had a good time with it, not mad that I read it, don't think I'll continue the series, but I just think that coming off of those other two, this one just didn't do it for me. Now, you'll probably have seen me praise this book quite a bit because I did like it. There's nothing wrong with it other than what I just said, but I don't think it fits that romance, fantasy, equal measure. I don't think it does that. I don't think it has that. I do also have to talk about the other one that everybody talks about when talking about romantasy and having a great romance and a great fantasy plot, and that is From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. Now, I love the first two books of that series. I think they are fantastic. And then the third book happened and the plot fell off and something was being teased that wasn't being offered. And I felt like it was just dangling it in front of us, letting us hope that that was the direction the story was going to go in, and it never did. But the first two books I stand wholeheartedly by. I think they are fantastic. I think the romance is done really well. I think the fantasy is done really well. We're dealing with vampires in From Blood and Ash. But again, like, it was great until that third book, and it just died for me. It died. And I can't tell you what happens because it's very spoilery. And I can't tell you why I think this because it's very spoilery because we are in third book territory. I did pick up the fourth book hoping it would renew my love of the series. It did not. And like I said, I can't exactly tell you what happens because it's very spoilery, but I will say it went in a direction that killed the fantasy plot and the romance. So, like, the things we're here for, you just destroyed. Why? Why? I don't understand. Okay, and then we got Emily Wilde. It's over here somewhere. I just don't know exactly where it is. Emily Wilde, Encyclopedia of Fairies. Okay. This is banter done to perfection. There is no better banter than Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. Between two romantic characters, not at all. And you can tell that Emily herself is a little autistic coded. She doesn't pick up on social cues. There's a lot of things that she needs explained to her in detail before she actually absorbs the information or what's happening, especially socially, but sometimes in other situations as well. And I loved the main characters, And this book is actually about her cataloging the fairies of this world. And she's on the hunt for an elusive set of fairies that she knows about, the world knows about, but no one's been able to contact. So the fantasy story is there. The romance is there. I do think there are some people who think that the romance happens a little too fast. And I'll just say this. I don't think it does. I think Emily just doesn't have the cognizance to recognize what's going on between her and the other character in this coupling. And so when it happens quickly. And then she has to kind of rethink all of the things that have happened leading up to the moment where it becomes a romance. And I just love them together. I love them together. I cannot wait for the second book in this series. Absolutely, hands down, loved it. And then we have One Dark Window, the gothic fantasy that stole my heart. I don't know if I would put One Dark Window up next to A Strange and Stubborn Endurance as far as like dark fantasy with a twist and romance. But I did think it was awesome. The atmosphere in this book is amazing. The fantasy and the magic system are pretty dang good. And I do think it has a good fantasy plot if you like the gothic writing style. That is a big caveat that I will just throw in there, that if you don't like gothic writing, this isn't the book for you, because this is gothic to its core. If you think you might like gothic writing but don't like flowery writing, well, you probably don't really like gothic writing, or probably haven't been introduced to full-on gothic writing. And so having this love of gothic horror and then having that introduced into a fantasy book made me really, really love this book. And again, we have a really cute enemies to lovers romance. Now, I don't think these characters are genuinely enemies to lovers. And when I say genuinely enemies to lovers, let me pan over just a second. There's my favorite enemies to lovers couple right there. You really got to be enemies for me to buy into the enemies to lovers trope. But I thought that the way their relationship evolved was really good. Really, really enjoyed it. And then we have The Serpent and the Wings of Night. Now, I just realized I forgot to write down the authors' names, and so I'm just going to be saying the titles of the book, but I will be posting pictures in case you're just listening to this video instead of watching it. I will be posting pictures of all of the books, so you will have the author's name, but this is Carissa Broadbent. And through all of the reading of this book, I was like, oh, this is Throne of Glass for adults. I have to tell you, I really like Throne of Glass. And I really liked this book in particular. I thought that the trial that the main character had to face, and her being human in a vampiric world, being raised that way, and fighting for a boon for her to be able to still remain in this world as an adult and not be under the protection of her father, I thought it was a really good way to set it up. I really thought the tournament was great. The way that the two main characters, the love interest, how they ended up bonding was great. And I really loved the fantasy elements here. They're more supernatural than they are fantasy, and I guess it depends on whether or not you consider vampires fantasy to begin with. I know they are urban fantasy characters for the most part, but a lot of people consider the undead supernatural as opposed to fantasy. But this is not fae like Throne of Glass. This is fantasy, or this is vampires. And so if you liked Throne of Glass, definitely read this book. Even if you didn't really like Throne of Glass, or you thought Throne of Glass read a little too young, read this one, because this one was so good. I really, really enjoyed it. Okay, then I read The Curse of Saints because that came in my Fairy Loot box. And it was funny. There were a couple of people that I know really well that were like, I'm skipping this one. Have you guys seen the cover? Have you read the blurb? It didn't sound all that appealing to them. And I was like, you know what? It says enemies to lovers. I'm going for it. I really would like enemies to lovers. So let's just see what it is. Guys, fantasy and romance in equal measure, The Curse of Saints. That is the book you need to be going for, especially if you are a From Blood and Ash fan and are missing the fact that From Blood and Ash went downhill. The Curse of Saints is definitely for you. And I've heard a couple people say that this reads YA. I don't get it. I honestly do not get it, because I did not think this read YA at all. And I think our main character's situation, where she has having to go to another kingdom alongside the King's Guard, the enemy that she has to be around a good majority of the time, there's a lot of pressure on her to do the right thing. There's a lot of pressure on her to fulfill her end of the bargain. There's a lot of pressure on her to hide her magic. And she has all of these things that she's got weighing her down. And then she has to go with the King's Guard to a different country, a different nation. And the way she infiltrates this nation is through the prince of this kingdom. They both know that they're being played. So it's not really a love triangle, but it's kind of written that way because she's trying to get information from the prince, and in so she's trying to develop a relationship with him, while dude bro over here is on the side going, what about me? But I think it played out really well, and I think that the fantasy elements were stronger in this book than the romance, but I do think the romance was still very good. And then I read Capture the Crown by Jennifer Estep. And I have to say, guys, I didn't like this one. It was one of those books, and this will come up again later. I do not like it when the main character, all they can think is, oh, he's hot. Oh, she's hot. Oh, he's hot. Oh, she's hot. No, that's not the way you do pining. It's okay to say it every now and then. It's okay for you to brush up against each other and flush. It is totally okay to misread situations because you are flustered. Totally fine. But the constant, oh my God, he's hot. Oh my gosh, she's hot. That is annoying. Annoying. And our main character saves her enemy's life. For what reason? Because he's hot. Because he's hot. No, I do not recommend this one. Oh, and then one of my newest favorites, The Bridge Kingdom by Danielle L. Jensen. Love this. I've actually talked about this book a lot recently, especially since I just read the second book of this series, so I'm just going to give you a little overview. We have a character whose sisters were all raised together by the king. They're all the king's daughters, to become assassins, and they are to do this in order to infiltrate their enemy kingdom, and they are brainwashed into thinking that this other kingdom is horrible, that they do horrible things, and they are the reason that their nation is suffering and their people are starving. Fast forward just a bit, she goes to marry said king and finds out these things might not be true, and everything ensues from there. So I love this book, and I love the fantasy and political story that is in this book. This is highly, highly political. So if you are not into political fantasy, this might not be the book for you. But if you do like political fantasy and you want a little bit of romance in your story, this does get hot and heavy. So I'd put the spice level pretty high, especially because we have a girl who's trained to be an assassin to do whatever it takes. And sometimes that leads to people being naked. Let's just say that. And so I really loved both of these books. And I do plan to continue the series, even though the duology of those two is finished. There are going to be 3 duologies set in this world. So the next 2 will follow someone different. But I'm so excited. I'm so excited to see who the new couple is that will be following in this world and where it goes from there. I have an idea. I have an idea of who it's going to be, but I don't want to spoil anything. So I will leave that to myself. But yes, this is another one that I think the fantasy actually outweighs the romance in this story, or at least the story outweighs the romance in this story. And the plot definitely leans more towards what's going on politically than it does romance, but it's still pretty heavy in the romance, and I really, really enjoyed it. I'm going to throw this one in here because it is slightly romantasy, but it's not one where I think the romance takes over the story, but the romance kind of comes to the forefront. And so I'm putting this in here, but A Broken Blade by Melissa Blair. I loved this one. This one is definitely a fantasy story with romance, not necessarily a romantasy. It's not so heavy on the romance, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Anyway, I loved this book. Absolutely loved it. And I think that if you like stories of the Fae, this will be a book that you enjoy. If you like stories about assassins, this will be a book that you enjoy. And if you don't think too hard about the romance, you probably would still like it, even if you're not a romance reader. But again, one that is politically heavy and really has ties to our main character's role in the political situation that's going on. So really, really enjoyed it. She is the King's Blade. She is an assassin. She is going after someone who is becoming a threat to the kingdom. And in doing so, she finds love along the way. So There we go. Okay, and then I read Promise of Fire by Amanda Boucher. Boucher. Uh, He's so hot. She's so hot. He's so hot. She's so hot. Couldn't do it. Couldn't do it. I DNF'd this one because, I mean, I got about 70% of the way through it and then I was done. I was done. I'm like, girl, you are in danger. You are about to die. Why are we thinking, oh my gosh, he looks so hot when he's fighting? No. No. Think of how you need to survive, not how hot he is when he's fighting. Come on. Come on. Yeah, DNF this one about 70% of the way through. And then Neon Gods. The Hades and Persephone that is definitely worth reading as long as you are in for some smut, because this is heavy, heavy on the smut. And I like this one. I do think it is a good romantasy, especially if you are into the Olympians and the Greek gods and stuff like that, because the way it plays out is... I'm trying to think of how to say this without spoiling anything. Persephone in this story is a very empowered Persephone, and I loved that. And her reason for escaping Olympus is a little different than the original tale, but it works here. It works. And I think I loved this one so much because of that, because we get such an empowered Persephone, and that's not something that we usually get. We usually get a Hades that has all the power. And in this one, no, Hades doesn't have all the power, and Hades actually, he's a bit of a softie. And I do like that. I do like that maybe our perceptions of Hades are a little bit different than what we anticipated. He does have some darkness to him, and he definitely has some kinks, but that is neither here nor there unless you're going to read it, because it's pretty heavy on the smut, like I said, but it does have a really good fantasy story alongside the romance in this one. So I definitely recommend this over A Touch of Darkness, because you get a good story out of this. And the main character is not such a brat. So there's that. Oh, also, I forgot to write this one down. A King So Cold by Ella Fields, I believe is the author of that. No, I hate bratty main characters, and let me tell you, the main character of this story is such a brat. I wanted to jump into the book and punch her in the face. I hated it so much. I picked it up though because it was touted as a romantasy with a good fantasy plot, and that it was a dark romance, and I've never really read a dark romance before. I think Neon Gods might be considered dark romance. Someone has started mowing. I apologize if you can hear that, or my dog snoring. But anyway, I couldn't get past how bratty this main character was. Like, I do not care about you and I hate you, so I don't want to read about you anymore. And I DNF'd it. I completely DNF'd it. And then let's talk about the Hurricane Wars. I should have brought you guys my beautiful copy to show it off. I love my Fairy Loot edition. If I have the pictures on my phone, I'll just kind of show them off here as we're talking. So right there, that's who our main characters are. They are Kylo Ren and Rey. But in this book, we have a shift, because if you know the Star Wars story, obviously this has been reimagined for a fantasy world. And there are, like, not spaceships, but like steampunk type ships that are sailing through and across these worlds. And we have a light magic user and a dark magic user, and their worlds are colliding. And they end up on this planet where the main character finds out this is the planet she was from. She had been shipped off to another kingdom in order to protect her. And whenever she is in this war and she comes up against the dark magic user, the other main character, I'm having a hard time remembering their names because my brain says Rey and Kylo. Alaric and Talisian, I think, is what their names are. Alaric chases Talisian to this world where they are captured because they do a no-no on this world and put in prison in a cell together. And they obviously start fighting. And then once they are released upon the fact that Talisian, our main character, is the daughter and heir to the throne. And she kind of doesn't want to believe it, and she goes back to where she came from, goes and fights in this war. And then when the rebels themselves have to escape, they escape to her world, and then an alliance is made between our main characters to keep the peace. So I hope I described that well, because I've read the fan fiction. When it was originally a fan fiction, I read that whole thing and has never left my brain. It was like my comfort fic. So here's my thing I need to say about this particular book. It takes a knowledge of Star Wars. It really does to love this book. And I'm not saying that you can't read it and not enjoy it, or that you will not enjoy it because you don't know, but I do think there are certain things that you don't have the background for unless you've read or watched Star Wars, unless you've kept up with the Kylo Ren and Rey storyline throughout the sequel movies. My brain had a complete brain fart. Okay, and then I have two more. The next one is Payback's a Witch by Lana Harper. As you guys know, I have read the first two. I'm on the third. Well, I'm not reading it currently, but I do need to pick it up. And I have to say, this does also fit a good fantasy alongside a good romance. Now, this one is sapphic, and I don't think I mentioned this, but A Strange and Stubborn Endurance is gay. This one is sapphic. And I think the couple in this, they're so cute. And you get to see them in the second book. And so that made my life. But I do think that the story that evolves around them is a really good one. I don't know. The fantasy elements are there. The magic is there. This is a witchy story though. So again, I think people will probably want to classify this more as paranormal than they would fantasy, but the paranormal plot holds up and the romance holds up as well. So do I think it fits my romantasy that does both well? I do. I think it works really well. And it's a very quick read. I do think you're reading a contemporary book with witches though. So if you're not into the contemporary setting, it might be a little off-putting. If you're not into the small town setting, it might be a little off-putting. And I don't think this is for hardcore fantasy readers. I think this is for the people who like witchy books, the people who want a little fantasy in their books, but not a whole lot of fantasy or magic that they're familiar with, as opposed to a magic system that's new and lush, but still very good. Okay, and then I know we're talking about fantasy here, but I do have a sci-fi that I must address. Ice Planet Barbarians. Is this a stand-up plot with stand-up romance? No, but it's cute as heck. I'd still recommend this one if you are just in for a smutty good time, but I do not think the sci-fi story holds up, guys. Come on. Were we kidding anybody? I just, no, I don't like it. And there's one more. I did say that those were the last ones, but I did forget about this one. And that would be Winter's Orbit by Everina Maxwell. This is similar to A Strange and Stubborn Endurance, but sci-fi. But I don't know if the sci-fi political story holds up nearly as well as A Strange and Stubborn Endurance. I think that it's cute. It's a cute book with a cute romance, and we are dealing with trauma, just like we are in A Strange and Stubborn Endurance, and healing from trauma. I just think Foz did it a little better. All right, that is it for my video today. Like, subscribe, and if you want to connect with me in any other way, I do have a Linktree link down below with all the ways that you can connect with me on social media, my Patreon, and if you want to read my smutty fan fiction. Bye.